Yeah, I think we can kick off. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. We can kick off.
Great. Okay, so thanks for inviting me. So what's the plan today?
Welcome to you and welcome to everyone else in the webinar. Quite a few of our attendees have already joined, and more will be joining, we're sure. It's a 30-minute webinar, so let's not beat around the bush a lot. Let's dive right in the interest of time. So first, let me introduce myself. I am Anirban Banerjee. I am the marketing lead of Web Spiders, and with me is Siddharth Jhunjhunwala, the CEO of Web Spiders. We, if you don't know about Web Spiders, we are a digital agency with specializing in mobility, AI solutions, and event technologies. And it is actually the latter part of those specializations that we will be talking about today primarily, because as we know, the world has been very different for the last few months. I mean, 2 months ago we would not be having this webinar, right, Sid? I mean, this
Absolutely,
would be
absolutely.
yeah. This is unprecedented times. So the whole world has had to pivot to a much more digital way of working. It's everything is digital, and the whole world has had to frankly cut back on a lot of things that we would consider luxuries right now, because the focus is, especially the business world's focus, is more on continuity right now. So with that in mind, with that little bit of an introduction in mind, actually the when we had discussed hosting this webinar, a question came to me, which I'll be asking you right now, which is, why events? I mean, why are we talking about events during a time when business continuity itself is at risk? I mean, would you say that events is a necessity for companies right now, or is it still a bit of a luxury for growth? I mean, what's your view on that?
Sure. Thanks for teeing that off, Anirban. And thanks, guys, for being here. It looks like almost a full house. So as all of us are working from home, so first of all, if there are any IT issues, please request your patience on that. So now, the topic, I guess, for today, what we're trying to discover is how do employee events and specifically sales enablement events work in today's scenario. And I think I want to answer your question. Events, especially for B2B and especially for the corporate sector, is a lifeline. Is a lifeline for multiple companies. It's something that cannot be stopped, because for many companies this is actually a means to not only getting business, but for means to driving energy, for means to drive learning, means to drive training, and it was a means for growth. And what has happened is that with the in-person events being suspended for at least 6 to 12 months, there has to be a way. This is not a luxury, as most companies realize. Training employees or talking to customers is not a luxury, and the B2B companies rely on that. And the commercial event sector that sort of does all the traditional trade shows, they rely on events as a means of, there's a big sector. In fact, just to give you a perspective, the entire events industry is roughly about $650 billion globally. This includes all kinds of events, the ticketed events and the corporate events. And that's roughly equal to the size of the advertising industry in Enablement, which includes both digital advertising and the traditional newspaper, physical advertising. So it's a large industry. It's a large industry, and it's almost, to some degree, a lot of companies would almost classify this as an essential service. Yeah, does that help?
That is certainly a helpful introduction as to why we need to do this, and why, very frankly, so many people are joining us to talk and to discuss and to hear about events as well. That does lay the base for what we are going to talk about today. Now, Okay, this is the slide that we had discussed earlier about how there are two kinds of companies. I mean, what are these two kinds of companies?
Yeah, so just as a segue to what you asked me initially, uh, there are two kinds of companies in the sense that those who do employee events and those who don't. I think this sort of is a culture impact of people who do events, and events is slightly different to training, Anirban, because trainings are usually sometimes topical, or they might be domain related, or they might be a specific course that one person needs, right? It might be a skill training or it might be a soft skill training.
Yeah.
But events, what events do is that they actually drive energy into a single place. Now, what they do is that they get all the employees to get along in one room or one venue, and it drives the energy of that place. It drives the energy of the employees. It's also a way that they meet the entire C-suite. So usually what we will see is that in the employee events, from right from the CEO, chairman to each divisional head, VP, they're holding tracks. So for a medium-sized company to a large-sized company, this is probably the only way they can address all the employees together and address them in an effective manner. So as an example, this is an example of BT, who's one of our customers, and they had 3,000 people, and this was a sales event. This is 3,000 people. Now, this was, of course, pre-COVID. This was just last year. So they had 3,000 people. And the year prior to that, they had 4 venues globally, one each for APAC. There were 2 in Europe and then 1 in Americas, where, and this was only sales employees. So for the enterprise business, they traveled, they were there. And then last year, they actually had all the 3,000 people in one room. And right from the CEO to the directors to the VPs they were all there. So the energy that this drives, the education that people get, the networking that happens is unparalleled. And we are only talking about, right now, we are only talking about sales enablement events, and when you take employee events as a generic class, when you have all the employees, it's almost something that most medium to large companies cannot live without. So that's why we thought it's appropriate to address how those things can continue, because as many employees are working from home, we will find that many of the companies are due for their quarterly or for their annual events. Now, how do they do those events? And this webinar is essentially a thought to share some ideas and examples of how you use the on-air platform to carry out these events.
Thank you for your perspective. Just to sort of quickly segue into the hyper-focused topic of today's webinar, when we were discussing doing this webinar, I think I mentioned why specifically sales enablement. Why are we not taking the whole gamut of internal events, or why is such an importance on sales enablement events? So I mean,
so
maybe a little bit.
I'll give you. I mean, we are all at home. We are probably a little bit more relaxed than the being at office, working from office. So the fact is, sales sells, right? See, that's the reason. Sales sells. There's nothing like sales. Sales cures all. And this is the reason. Actually, it's good that you have this slide. So while I think at this point, a lot of companies are looking at survival for the next quarter or two. How do they continue the business as usual? And then they're looking at growth opportunities after the next quarter. So when it comes to budgets, for example, Anirban, the sales enablement events are at the top of the line. That's what the budgets are being authorized for first. And that's why it's a good subset of the employee event. And I think if budgets have to be slashed, then the last budget that would be slashed would be a sales enablement event.
True. Now that we've actually spent a good 7-10 minutes on the why, let's jump into the meat of the webinar, which is how and what. I mean, what does a virtual event look like? I mean, we have a slide on there right now, but if you can take us through that, how is it same as, and how is it different from a traditional event structure? And does it even need to follow a traditional
Yeah.
event structure?
Yeah, no, there are a good couple of points on that. Now, the traditional event structure in a way is largely good. So we generally recommend that people want to follow that. But the problem is, how do you follow that structure when each person is working from home? You know, and so this is an example of near accurate uh, agenda for, let's say, a virtual event for sales enablement. So what you see here is the one on the top right. If you see some of the legends that you have, so live indicates which is a live session, something like what we're doing right now. The pre-recorded are things that are pre-recorded. So whether it's a session that was pre-recorded from last year or last quarter, or whether these are training videos, or these could be just things. Most companies that we work with do have a library of material that was previously recorded. So this is what it means. Now the round table that you see just below that with the 4 people sitting are essentially breakout for small groups. So typically 6 to 7 people. And they are talking about a specific topic where each one is contributing, right? So what you see in the panel sessions is that is usually one way. There's a panel or there's a keynote speaker and he's talking, and most of the people are just listening, and then they interact via Q&A and polls and social wall. But in a roundtable, you break out into multiple of those. And one interesting thing that we have is, one thing that what events happen is that you discover new people and new content. Now take that, either it's during coffee time or during the lunch time, you want the employees to go and be in the social lounge, so to speak. That's equivalent to the tea break, that's equivalent to the lunch break. And that's where you need that effect where people can literally bump into each other, discover each other, see their LinkedIn profile or see their corporate profile, and engage in a conversation or a video call right away, right? So if you see this particular structure, Anirban, we are going through the keynote. These are all single, and then at 11 a.m. you see that they are going into a round table, and this would not be one round table. This would typically be more than 6 to 10 round tables that are happening, right? And then the employees would have, or the sales guys would have be pre-assigned, or they can choose one of the round tables. So that's the whole idea. Similarly, at 12 or during the lunchtime, they can just go to the social lounge. So while they are probably having lunch at home or they're taking a break, they can still engage and receive prompts or pings from other people who are attending. And at the same time, you will see that during the exhibit hall, if there is an exhibit hall, so some of these large employee events, they often have, say, vendors or partners who come and exhibit as well. Like in case of BT, for example, they had a number of partners, products that their sales guys used to sell. So the OEMs or the principal, they actually had a booth, and they were trying to train the sales guys that, look, okay, for cybersecurity, this is what we sell. So Symantec could have a booth, and an MDM vendor could have a booth, and different. So their objective was to make the sales team of BT understand their products better, because if the sales team can understand it better, they can sell better. So again, in exhibit hall, you would walk into a virtual exhibit. You could see what they're doing, you could see videos, and then you can engage in a video conversation. So I'll show you some slides. I don't know how much time we have. We wanted to keep the webinar short, 30 to 40 minutes, 30 minutes, and then 10 minutes. So does this help? I think this
this actually provides a great insight about how layered an event structure is, and if we have to sort of carry that same live event structure into a more virtual setting, the solution has to be layered as well. It cannot be a sort of a one size fits all solution. Which I mean, when first the need for us to stop in-person events, it hit us like a bolt of lightning. So a lot of companies, what they did was, obviously we shifted to what we knew, which was video conferencing tools. tools like Zoom and tools like
So use
the various
yeah.
ones. Yeah, a number of tools.
Yeah.
So they all shifted to tools, and what we are seeing more and more is that that is not enough, because this level of complexity and this level of layers of various types of activities, it's not what these simple video conferencing tools were built for.
Right.
So yeah, which brings me to the next point as to then what, if not video conferencing tools, then what?
So that's a fair point. In fact, some of the attendees would ask that, okay, why can't we use an off-the-shelf video conferencing platform versus a virtual event platform? So this is a good example of, see, the thing is that each one has a sweet spot. Each one is useful for certain situations. And so I think what I'll try and do, Anirban, is explain when a virtual event platform is more useful. So let's start with the first point. Now, of course, size of event. Usually when you're talking about, like for example, the case of BT, the 3,000 people, right? Now, 3,000 people means you cannot just have 3,000 people on one session. And even if they are, then the whole breakout management, the multi-track management. So the size of event matters. So usually what we see is that the moment you start having more than 150 to 200 people, the traditional video conferencing tools are not good enough. You could have live streaming, for example, like something like Facebook Live, etc., or the Facebook Workplace equivalent. But definitely the video conferencing platforms are not helpful when you talk about size. Now, when you talk about multiple content tracks, I think you saw what we had before is the, let me just quickly run back to that. Yeah. So you can see that when you have a multiple content track, like this track 1, track 2, track 3, and in some cases you have up to 10 tracks. Again, something like a video conference single doesn't work because you cannot just email links, and you cannot allow, you have to allow the ability for people to come out of a room, get into another room, based on what they're seeing, just what it happens in a regular conference. So that's another one. Now, interactivity is probably the biggest, one of the largest reasons, because most of the video conferencing platforms have very limited engagement. You're just talking about some form of chat or at the most Q&A poll. Now, I'll show you in some of the screens how gamification during the event, advanced Q&A, and what I mean by advanced Q&A is, for example, when somebody asks a question, other people can vote on that question, so that as a speaker finishes a session, he gets a Quora style, list of what's the most important question. So engagement and finding newer ways of engagement is very important, because, please try and remember that this is not a 1 hour, 30-minute duration for an event. Usually an event is for a day. For many of our customers, it is 2 days, 3 days, and can be up to 5 days. And then lots of our customers are actually doing it across the year for different groups. So for Germany, they would do this. For Singapore, they would do on this day. For US. So it's something that you do it across the year, and for the same office, they are doing multiple times in a quarter. So engagement is very key. Again, we discussed on the exhibitor pavilion, you don't see that in other platforms. Things like, drinks lounge or a green room. So, in a regular event, you will see speakers who check in, they have like a speaker's room or a green room where they practice and they engage with other speakers, like a speaker's lounge. So what On-Air, E2M On-Air does is that actually gives you that platform of a green room. So to practice, to rehearse, to connect with other speakers. You have the roundtable networking. And then of course, when you have the evening or the lunch sessions, they have the ability to get into the social lounge where they actually discover people. There is no agenda other than being there. It'll stay in the background and it'll allow people to discover each other. Same with this, the concept of serendipity. I have met so many people by chance during events. I mean, we've been as an attendee, it's been more than, I would say, 25 years attending events. And, the fact that you're discovering content and people by chance even with all the planning, is very key to an event. Of course, the multiple event model. Now, one thing that, of course, is different is the cost level, right? So the last point, video conferencing platforms are very cheap. Live streamings are slightly more, and virtual event platforms are more than that. So that's one thing. So each is good. If you're having a 30-minute meeting where you're not looking at finding new people, everyone, you have a specific agenda to discuss, then you don't need on air or any other virtual event platform. Mm-hmm. If you have something where you just want to stream, then streaming is good enough.
Okay. Actually, this brings up me to another point, pretty organic segue into another point, which is actually a question, which is, while we'll have some time dedicated for questions at the end of the webinar, we have a question right now from Chandrika, who asks, what is an exhibitor pavilion? I mean, and do you want to address that now, or do you want to get to that in a few?
This is it's good. I mean, let me jump, and then I'll come back to these. So something like this. So what happens is that we have a standard 3D booth structure, as well as we do custom 3D booths. It can be very interactive in Unity as well, and so they get to go around in booths like this. And when they find, then let's say you're interested in this specific booth, you see what the brochure is, you see a video, and you can actually download or email yourself the brochures or videos. And if you like to talk, and if they're available, you say start a conversation right here. And when you start a conversation, it could be a chat, or you can engage into a video conversation. So this is what we mean by a virtual booth. And then you can actually even leave, for example, if it's a commercial event, you can actually even schedule a meeting. So we allow attendees to put in their like a Calendly invite, or if they don't have Calendly, then we have an in-house calendar system. So they can actually share their calendar using E2M's Zoe calendar and let people book meetings. So, and this is showing an example of seeing a video of that specific exhibitor. Does that help?
I hope that helps, Chandrika. So basically, it's like an interactive experience, a 3D interactive experience of the virtual experience of the show floor. So pretty much, and this is something that we've been talking about quite a while, the roundtable video concept. So what's roundtable video, and how is it different from video, just video conference? And how does it add?
Like, so in most of these events, Anirban, what we discover is that you have these big sessions where you're just supposed to sit and listen, right? And then you might be, if you get a chance, you'll have the microphone and you can ask a question. And in a larger event, like the one we showed you, sometimes it's very hard to even get the microphone. So usually, other than tracks during lunchtime or in specific times, or in one-to-one coaching or group coaching. So let's say, for example, you have a VP of sales, for example, right? And the VP of sales is hosting a meeting for the top 5, sales guys in the room, or it's an open invite where anybody can go and book a time. So he might be addressing 5 people at one go. And so let's say from 4 to 5 p.m., the round table is where you go and see what are the conversations going on different topics, and you can just go and grab a seat. And when you say grab a seat, then you have a voice. So you are actually a participant as a video. The way I am a participant here, you can actually you can communicate and join that, share your experiences, share your screen. So it's, that's what we mean by a roundtable.
Okay. Thanks. From what I understand, roundtable video, I mean, that's, of course, a good way to get a small group talking and interacting. But then how does it differentiate itself from the overall session broadcast? Is it a question of volume, or is there something else to it as well?
Yeah, so these are different formats, Anirban. So, whether it's one-to-one, many-to-many, many-to-one. So usually the broadcast is many-to-one. Right? So you have one, let's say, keynote speaker who's sharing his thoughts, and that's many-to-one. then you might have a many to one in this, one to many, where the one is actually a panel. So what you see right now is actually a panel, right? And all the others would be spectators. So you could have, one, two, three. You can have over, the theoretical limit is actually 10,000, but we've yet to cross that. But you can have all those people spectate. So that's the difference. And then the round table is usually just a closed group of 6 to 7 people who are discussing a specific topic.
Okay. Now, if we are to sort of come back to the overall, like we said, the whole layer of the event, just looking at the session that you showed and the various types, how do you sort of keep the attention and the focus of attendees for 4-hour, 6-hour, 8-hour, 2-day, 3-day event? I mean, even Netflix can't do that. Even entertainment can't do that. So how do you do that with video?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. In fact, that's one of the big reasons for having a proper virtual event or online event platform is, of course, very few people can, be on a Netflix screen, for example, from morning to evening. Some can, but most people can't, I'm assuming. And what you really get is that the platform doesn't mean that you're watching a video all the time. So this is an example of one of the engagement where it's a social wall. So imagine you've done the keynote, you've done one round table, and then you need to go and get some work done or even go for a walk or you're going for lunch. But like Facebook, you have your own private social wall for the company. And you continue that conversation either, and that could be related to that specific session, or it could be overall for the event. So you continue that conversation across the day. And then you jump in right in when you come back to your desktop. So the experience is that all employees or all attendees would have the app for when they are not at their desk. And otherwise they would be like on a Chrome browser on their laptop. And so more examples, let me show you. So, one-to-one messaging, for example. So you don't expect, for example, the CEO of BT to be, for 3 days to be glued on to video screen, right? So now imagine the ability for a sales guy who's just joined a large company or a medium-sized company, and he can actually engage either by chat or video with the head of sales. Now that's almost impossible in the regular scheme of things. But now because it's an event, the energies are very focused in delivering the objective. And everybody knows that it's an event and we want. So this again, one-to-one messaging is another one. Polls is another one. But what I'm really excited about other than this is actually the gamification. So what happens is that while people are across the day, they can actually be part of various games. And these are all games designed to drive learning and engagement. So we have a lot of games come out of the box, and then we of course integrate third-party games as well. So having your own game store is sort of another way. And then you'll be surprised. This thing really counts. The leaderboard, and there's a whole competitive spirit where you see that these guys are ahead. And so you can get a point on everything that you do, right? From attending a session to asking questions to completing a trivia to, for example, visiting all booths and collecting the brochures and doing a quiz. So that, that's in a way all the training and learning that you've had, you are showing that you've learned and you're showing that you accomplished that. So this is how they spend the time. They might be spending only 2-3 hours watching a video, but this is how they spend the time for the rest of the day. And the fact is that, whether it's an in-person event or whether it's a virtual event, people will get distracted. I mean, you see it in events all the time. People are doing something on the phone or they're answering emails, and we respect that. And that's natural. You cannot expect people to shut off from what they're doing. So they are welcome to do what they need to do if that calls for. But then at the back of the mind, they know that, today is the sales event that's going on, right? And they are constantly engaging with the event stakeholders.
Okay. And just while I think we kind of covered it right now, There's a question from Neha, which is again very relevant and kind of, if you can address that a little more. Neha asks, what are the various ways in which attendees or customers can share their reactions or engagement to the virtual event session? So if you can address that a little more directly.
Yeah, so great question, Neha. So what we do is, one is like these surveys, right? So these prompt polls. So they can be like a quick, single question, or they can be a multi-question, and they can come after every, you can schedule them to come, say, pop up after every 30 minutes, after every hour, or after at the end of every survey. So this is more from the formal side. Yeah, so those days of, sending paper forms is gone. And then, of course, the social wall is a very big example. I mean, to be honest, the biggest use case of engagement we've seen is the private social walls, because people are used to the Facebook and LinkedIn experience and the Twitter experience that they use every day. Now, what happens is that when you go into a private event, of course, you don't want to publish those things online in terms of the public social media, but they want the same effect. So they want a hashtag, to be within the company. They want to call out people with @ They want to say how did they like it, or any comments on that. So this is really been, you can say, the most popular, other than the agenda and the video and all that. Social wall, if you see the numbers, when you track the metrics, is the most popular used module.
Okay, so I think that kind of brings us close to the end of it. We have already overshot by maybe a couple of minutes. So, we would like to open the floor for any other questions that you might have about event engagement, not just sales events, any event type of events, employee events, customer. Any questions you might have right now about not just the tool we showed, E2M Live, but about the whole event experience.
Okay. So while they're coming up, Anirban, I'd like to add just one more thing, that the events are created, personally, I think what events are is a concentration of energy. And we've seen this amazing growth of when you have an event, how things get done. Your collaterals get done, your background work gets done, your prep gets done. And I have not seen a more effective strategy, especially for B2B companies, and even for B2C is the same thing when you talk about the employees. Is personally, I have not seen something which is more effective and time effective.
True.
To transfer all the knowledge, to transfer all the experience to your colleagues and to your customers when it's a customer event. So I think, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, since we are coming to the end, we have a couple of other questions. First, we have a question from Nancy that asks how long we would take to plan the event, and how long the estimate, how long to plan the event, and what the cost estimate is to do virtual events.
So we'll address it in two parts. So the planning process, usually you can, of course, an event, at the heart of every event, Nancy, is the content. Right? So you need speakers either from within your company or as guest speakers or guest trainers. So that is something that, you have to figure out as a company where you're going to get the content from. If you have pre-recorded, then that is something that you can have. You can have some guest speakers. In fact, right now, the availability of some star guest speakers of every industry is higher because most of them are not traveling. So if you have a guru of your industry, so let's say you are in the banking industry or you are in the insurance industry and there is a guru in a specific topic, you are much more likely to attract him to come and speak in your company. So anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks, we found as enough to set up, because the best thing is you don't have to take care of catering. You don't have to go and take care of, physically booking a venue, and all those kind of physical logistics, like booking travel tickets, booking hotels, all of those things that truly don't really add directly to the quality of content. So 3 to 4 weeks is generally sufficient. yeah, from a platform perspective, you don't need more than a couple of weeks to do the trials, to set up the content, to make sure all your polls are set up, etc. And we give you a full white glove service, which means our support actually sets it up for you. You try it, you load test it, and you can launch it. And from a pricing perspective, it's based on the number of attendees, including the speakers, and number of days. So that's a rough model on how we price it. So what we welcome is you please send us a mail for a one-to-one call, or you can just respond back to the newsletter that you received, or email me at sid@webspiders.com, and we'll set up a meeting for you to understand what are the needs of your event. It'll be like a 30-minute call, and that's it. And then the same day you'll receive a proposal from our side in terms of how do you set up the whole event.
Okay, the questions do keep coming. So we have two or three more questions. The one, Chandrika, will address your next question last because that's kind of a nice segue into the end. So we have a question from Stella that asks, can delegates record the events?
No. Delegates generally cannot record the events, but the host of the session can switch on and off. So it's his decision whether he wants, because you don't want the delegates to get your content. So the way it would work is that your host of the session or the entire, they capture the video, and then they, if they like, then they can keep it in the archive so that the employees can come back later and watch the video as well, or the customers can come back. So that's a decision to be made by the host or the event planner. Delegates do not get that decision.
Monica wants to know what kind of games and activities you can do during virtual events to keep your team motivated.
So Monica, long story short, one is keeping a live leaderboard is really effective, which means that you need to show them that somebody else is getting these points. Now, in terms of what games, trivia games are really useful in terms of giving them questions which are leading questions, which are testing them. Trivia games has been very good. There were some games which were related to the physical space, like going and scanning QR code for treasure hunt. So that's not applicable now. But for example, activity-based games. So by checking into a session, by asking questions, by for example, by meeting people. So as an example, you can say that you are a sales guy. You must talk to 10 people who've been with the company for more than 1 year. Talk to 10 of them, and then you get 10 points. So they're motivated to go and accomplish that challenge. So you set up those challenges that you must go and talk to these many people. You must visit these booths. You must, if you do these activities, you get so many points. And then that is made public, the leaderboard, public as in within your own company. And that really drives the entire experience.
So basically what you do is you gamify the event experience itself. And as we know, that gamification itself has a strong pull of its own, whatever you gamify. So we have another question from Pradeep who asks, what are the other options to set up virtual events? So would you be able to address that, or should we let Pradeep ask it by opening up his microphone?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. So we do that. In the meantime, Stella has another point. She says exhibition areas that use virtual events are pre-recorded. I think she wants to know if these exhibition area videos are pre-recorded.
Yeah, generally they are pre-recorded. But the conversation is of course live. So when somebody wants to talk to the people who are on the booth, and it also indicates that they are in the booth or not. So if they've left, if they've gone for a lunch break, then it shows that nobody's available, and they can leave a lead or they can leave a question. But if they're available, then they just start a video call, and that's live.
Yeah. So making Pradeep's microphone, I think you would need to do that as you're the host of this webinar. So
I'll just answer. So the other options, so he's asking what are the other options to set up the virtual event. So the other options, so E2M On Air is our platform. So the other options would be that if there's a cost is an issue, or time is an issue, or if your event is very small, like you're getting 10, 20 people and it's just one session for 1 hour, then you just use, something like what, a Zoom or WebEx or, one of these platforms, GoToMeeting or something like that. And you don't need that kind of engagement, then that is an option that you can use. If you just want to broadcast, so if you're using any intranet tool like FB Workplace, or there are some others as well, like Akumina, etc. So then some of them have a broadcast facility and you can just broadcast. So these are alternatives that you could do for a quick sort of event. Of course, they come with lack of certain elements that drive the engagement, etc. But yeah, you could potentially do that as a watered down version of an event.
Okay, and finally, of course, Chandrika wants to know if there's any way to connect with us post this webinar for clarifications. And of course, I mean, we will be sending out a mail to everyone with the details.
I've sent my email as well just now.
Okay, yeah. So
please email me and we'll set up a one-to-one call with you. I mean, this is a good time because nobody can say I'm traveling. So usually within the same day, we are able to set up a call and, take you through. And if you need a proposal, then come back to you pretty quickly.
Okay, Stella has another question about, everyone is talking about cybersecurity for virtual meetings. So how secure is it?
Yeah. No,
I think this is a very important question.
Very important question. And to be honest, we wanted to use our own platform for today, and we will be using it subsequently. So Zoom has been, we don't know whether it's, I mean, of course, it's out in the media. So the best thing about these virtual events is that they are behind your corporate SSO. So if you have a corporate authentication via Microsoft or Outlook or Google, then they go behind that particular firewall. I think a lot of the security issues that came about were around the fact that the URLs were open and anybody could join them. So here, not only are the URLs not open, they are behind a VPN if you want, and they are definitely behind your own authentication. Number one. Number two is that the entire platform is not a new platform. So as an example, E2M Live is used by dozens of Fortune 500 companies over the last 7 years. So everything from token authentication to making sure that the SSL is in place, denial of service, they've all been vetted by the security teams of these large companies. So a lot of security hardening is already done, baked into the platform. So there is absolutely, I mean, of course, we cannot show you 100%, but it is 99.99% certain that your data will remain yours. And we will not allow third parties to enter into your event or be part of the data. So yeah, and especially because this one is Singapore focused. So our servers for Singapore are in Singapore. And we do the same for our European customers and in Virginia for our US customers. Yeah.
Okay, so that was quite a few questions, quite a few answers, quite an interesting conversation. Yeah. We'll say goodbye to you now, and like I said, you'll be getting a mail with our contact details, and a couple of days later, you'll also get a mail with a recording of the session, a link to the recording of the session. So we hope to talk to some of you again very soon.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks a lot. And yeah, please email me at sid@webspiders.com, and we'll be happy to set up further conversations with you. Thanks. Enjoy.
Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.